It started with a night that smelled of detergent and diesel, the kind of sticky summer air that clung to your lungs. June 12th, 1981, two men, both from the outskirts of El Paso, decided to take what they thought was a simple score. The laundromat on Mesa Avenue looked ordinary. Fluorescent lights flickering over humming washers, the dull rattle of quarters dropping into machines. But in the back, behind a dented metal door marked storage, there was something no one was supposed to know about. Bundles of Cartel cash hidden inside detergent boxes. Frank Dalton, 29, a truck mechanic with gambling debts, and his friend Ray Moreno, 27, an ex-dishwasher who talked too much when drunk, had been tipped off by a man named Luis Vega, who swore he'd seen men with pistols unloading bags there late at night. "It's money, man. Not quarters. Money," he'd said in a whisper at a bar. That whisper set off a chain that would last half a decade. The robbery was fast, sloppy, and reckless. Cameras caught only brief glimpses, two figures in balaclavas, one limping slightly, one taller and thinner. They forced open the back door with a crowbar, found the boxes, and filled duffel bags. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, were bricks of cash, still warm from being handled. By 2:17 a.m., they were gone, leaving behind a single boot print in the detergent dust. At 3:40 a.m., the store owner called the police after noticing the door ajar. By then, the bags were already in the trunk of a rusted Ford Fairlane heading north. What they didn't know was that the laundromat wasn't just a cash drop. It was a satellite front for the Cordero Cartel, a network that funneled drug money across the border. Within hours, word reached a man named Javier Cordero, known simply as El Blanco. He didn't call the police, he called his men. "Find them. Every road, every camera. I want the money, not excuses." The next morning, detectives in brown suits stood outside the laundromat while news crews recorded the shattered lock. A routine break-in, one officer said to a reporter, unaware of what they had just stepped into. Archive footage, 1981 news clip, reporter. Police say the suspects likely took only small cash reserves. Off-screen voice. Small? You have no idea. The official investigation lasted less than 2 weeks before being quietly closed due to lack of leads. The cartel's investigation, however, was only beginning. They pulled traffic camera tapes, bribed a city clerk to access vehicle registrations, and within 48 hours, they had names, Dalton and Moreno. The next part reads like a chase written in reverse. On June 14th, a gas station attendant outside Alamogordo remembered two nervous men buying fuel and sandwiches with crumpled bills. They looked like they hadn't slept. One had grease on his hands, like a mechanic. The same night, a motel owner near Roswell reported two men who checked in under fake names and left before dawn. By June 15th, both men had vanished. But the money trail didn't. On June 16th, a farmer named Sam Wilkes found an abandoned Ford Fairlane on a dirt road 20 kilometers from the nearest highway. Its hood was open, engine cold. Next to it lay two duffel bags, empty. Around them, tire marks and footprints led into the scrubland, then stopped. No blood, no bodies. Just silence. When county deputies arrived, they found only a cigarette butt and a matchbox with the logo of the Mesa Diner. Evidence log, 1981. Page 2. Two duffel bags, black canvas, no contents. Matchbox, the Mesa Diner. Vehicle registration, Franklin Dalton. No signs of struggle. Within hours, word reached El Blanco. Witnesses later recalled dark sedans moving through the desert that night. Locals said they saw lights on the horizon, cars that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't cops. One rancher said years later, it was them. From that moment, Dalton and Moreno were ghosts. Some claimed they made it to Mexico. Others said they were buried in the desert. Officially, they were missing persons. Unofficially, the cartel had a list of suspects, and everyone who'd spoken to Dalton in the previous month began disappearing too. Luis Vega, the man who told them about the money, was found dead in Juarez 3 weeks later. Gunshot to the head. Execution style, the coroner said. The police noted his connection to Dalton, but didn't pursue it. No evidence, the report read. But Detective Harold Finn, a quiet veteran of the department, didn't buy it. He'd worked El Paso PD for 20 years and had seen enough cartel killings to know patterns. He kept a private file marked Dalton/Moreno laundromat case. In his notes, no blood, no bodies, no cash. But too many coincidences. Why leave empty bags? He tried to reopen the file, but his supervisor told him to let sleeping dogs lie. For 5 years, he didn't. Transcript excerpt, 1984 interview, Finn. You don't just vanish in daylight. Someone erased them, and they did it clean. By 1982, rumors spread that the money had been laundered back through other laundromats. Full circle, Finn wrote bitterly. He interviewed the laundromat owner again, a man named Peter Gonzalez, who admitted under pressure that he'd been forced by cartel men to keep cash on site. They said it's just storage, Gonzalez told him. I never asked questions. In the margins of the report, Finn scrawled, he's scared. Too scared. Then, in October 1983, an anonymous envelope arrived at Finn's desk. Inside, a photograph. 2 men, seen from behind, walking into a gas station. One wore a denim jacket. The other carried a duffel bag. The timestamp read, June 13th, 1981, 10:42 a.m. On the back, a single word, look. It was printed on thermal paper, the kind used in old security cameras. Finn cross-referenced the gas station, Highway 54, near Tularosa. He drove there himself. The clerk who'd worked there had died 2 years earlier, but his daughter remembered a detail. They asked if there was a bus stop nearby. Said their car broke down. The photo proved they'd survived at least a day after the robbery. But what happened after that remained a question buried under 5 years of silence. Then came July 1986. A construction crew working near the Rio Hondo riverbed unearthed something. First a boot, then bones. 2 sets. Beside them, a rusted pistol and the remains of a wallet. Inside, an ID card belonging to Raymond Moreno. It had been 5 years since the laundromat robbery. The desert had finally given up its secret. The sheriff called Finn. You might want to come see this, he said. The bodies were found less than 2 miles from where the Fairlane had been abandoned. Forensic analysis confirmed gunshot wounds to both skulls. Time of death, late June 1981. Coroner's report, 1986, page 4. Subject 1, Moreno GSW to occipital region. Subject 2, Dalton GSW to frontal region. No personal effects except wallet fragment. Estimated time of death, 5 years prior. The story could have ended there. A failed heist, 2 dead thieves, no justice. But Finn noticed something odd. Both men had been shot with different calibers. 2 killers, not one. In the soil nearby, under a layer of dust, they found something else, a film canister. Inside was a strip of 35mm negatives, partially degraded by heat. When developed, it showed a single image, a motel room, a duffel bag on the bed, stacks of cash half-counted, and a hand reaching into the frame. Finn stared at it for a long time. The photo wasn't of the robbery. It was after. Someone had been with them after they fled. Someone who wasn't dead. So they didn't just disappear, Finn said quietly. They were silenced. The question was by whom? The case files show that in late 1981, the Cordero Cartel's enforcer, Miguel Soria, had crossed into New Mexico and disappeared the same month. His car was later found near the same riverbed. Some whispered that Soria double-crossed his own boss, took the money for himself, and killed Dalton and Moreno to cover his trail. Others said the cartel killed all 3. The official report listed Soria as missing, presumed deceased. But the film strip changed everything. In the blurred background of the motel photo, faintly visible in the mirror, was a reflection, someone's face. Not Dalton, not Moreno, not Soria, a third man. The image was too grainy to identify, but Finn sent it for analysis anyway. While waiting for results, he went through old call logs. One name kept appearing, M. Ruiz, a laundry supplier who delivered to the laundromat twice a week. Ruiz had no record, no address beyond P.O. Box. When Finn checked the box in 1986, it had been closed for 5 years. But in the postal file, he found something unexpected, a forwarding address. Los Lunas, New Mexico. The small town lay 2 hours north. On August 3rd, 1986, Finn drove there himself. The house was small, white, quiet. A woman answered the door, Ruiz's sister. He left, she said. Years ago. Mexico, maybe. Said it was getting too hot. Did he ever mention 2 men from El Paso? Finn asked. She hesitated. Once. Said they made a mistake taking what wasn't theirs. Said he'd warned them. Finn looked around the house, saw an old black and white photo on the wall. A man in overalls standing beside a laundromat sign. Mesa, wash and dry. Ruiz had worked there long before the cartel used it. He wasn't just a supplier. He was inside it from the beginning. The analysis of the photo came back a week later. The blurred face in the mirror matched Ruiz. Finn realized the truth too late. Ruiz had orchestrated the heist. He'd fed Dalton and Moreno the tip, waited for them to steal the money, then followed them into the desert and took it back for himself, or for the cartel. Either way, he vanished afterward, the perfect ghost. When Finn presented his findings, the department told him to close the case. Too cold, the chief said. No living suspects. Finn filed his last report under unresolved. In his final note, they found bones, not justice. But someone still out there counting the cash. The film negative, the only surviving piece of the story, was sealed in an evidence bag marked Exhibit C. Its label read, Recovered, Rio Hondo Site, 1986. Decades later, when the file was declassified, the photo resurfaced online, igniting new theories. Some said Ruiz had been killed in Mexico. Others claimed he changed his name and lived quietly somewhere in Texas. But one fact remained, the money was never found. And in every official ledger, 2 entries still read missing. Dalton and Moreno, buried, forgotten, but not erased. Because somewhere in that desert, a third shadow had stood over them, pulling the trigger and walking away with millions. As the sun sank over the Rio Hondo, Detective Finn's voice on an old tape summed it up best. Some crimes don't end when you find the bodies. They end when you find the truth. And sometimes, that's the one thing they make sure you never see. If you want to know what was found years later, something hidden even deeper, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. 5 years after the discovery near the Rio Hondo, the desert still carried whispers. By 1991, the old case was buried under dust and bureaucracy, labeled closed, insufficient evidence, but Detective Harold Finn could never quite shake the feeling that something was missing. He'd retired 2 years earlier, living in a small trailer outside Alamogordo, spending most mornings drinking bitter coffee while staring at the endless horizon. The Dalton Moreno case had followed him like a ghost. 2 small-time crooks who had robbed the wrong laundromat and vanished into legend. Yet every few months, something new surfaced, a rumor, a photograph, a name. That summer, a call came from a journalist named Emily Cross, who had been researching missing cartel assets from the early 1980s. She had stumbled on a peculiar lead, a customs record from 1982 showing that a man named Manuel Ruiz had crossed in Mexico 3 weeks after the robbery, using a fake passport, but with a photo that looked eerily like the grainy reflection in Finn's recovered motel photo. I think your guy didn't die, she told him over the phone. Finn's hand trembled slightly as he scribbled her words. You sure? Positive. And I think he came back. Emily was younger, ambitious, and obsessed with forgotten crimes. She'd found references to Ruiz in local land records. Someone by that name had purchased a small property in 1986 under an alias, Mateo Robles. The location? Just 20 miles from the riverbed where Dalton and Moreno's bodies were found. Finn agreed to meet her there. It was early September when they drove out to the property, a faded sign reading Robles Auto Salvage. The yard was filled with rusted cars and scavenged metal, the air thick with the scent of oil and old rain. An old man watched them from the porch, cigarette glowing in the shade. Can I help you folks? He asked. Emily stepped forward. We're looking for Mateo Robles. Is that you? The man exhaled slowly, nodding. Was. A long time ago. He looked directly at Finn. recognition flashing briefly in his eyes. "You're a cop." "Used to be," Finn said quietly. "Then we might have something in common," Robles murmured. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the wind brushing against the metal sheets. Finn asked the question that had haunted him for a decade. What happened to those men, Dalton and Moreno? Robles laughed dryly. "You don't want that story. It's not justice, it's arithmetic." Emily took out a small recorder. "We do want it," she said. The old man looked at her, then sighed. "I warned them," he began. "Told them not to touch that place. The laundromat wasn't a secret. Not really. The cartel used it because no one ever looks at dirty clothes. They thought it was easy money, but easy money always costs the most." His voice cracked slightly. "I didn't pull the trigger," he added, eyes distant. "But I was there." He described how he'd followed Dalton and Moreno after the robbery, not to kill them, but to retrieve what the cartel considered theirs. "They were panicking," he said. "They thought they'd gotten away. But one of them, Ray, wanted to count the money. They stopped at a motel near Tularosa. That's when everything went wrong." According to Robles, the cartel had sent 2 men to track them, Miguel Soria and another enforcer known only as El Toro. They were supposed to bring the money back quietly, Robles said. But greed got in the way. Soria took the money, left El Toro behind, and killed Dalton and Moreno in the desert. Then the cartel killed Soria for going rogue. Emily leaned forward. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I took what was left. Not the money. The film. Proof." "Proof of what?" Finn asked. Robles looked out toward the mountains. "That even monsters keep receipts." He told them he'd taken photographs the night it happened. Images of Soria with the bodies of the cars of the handoff. "I thought if I kept them, one day it would matter. But nobody ever came asking." Finn's pulse quickened. "Where are the photos now?" "In a safe," Robles said, "under the salvage yard." He led them inside, through a narrow hallway stacked with engine parts. Behind a false wall was a small steel door. He twisted the dial and opened it. Inside were several sealed envelopes, their paper yellowed with age. He placed them on a workbench, hands shaking slightly. "Take a look." Inside were photographs, grainy but unmistakable. One showed Dalton lying face down in the sand. Another showed Soria holding a pistol, and in the background, a third man's shadow stretched across the headlights of a car. On the back of one photo, faint handwriting read, "Mesa, June 16th, 1981. Finn stared at them, speechless. "Why keep these all these years?" he finally asked. Robles lit another cigarette. "Because the truth doesn't rot. People do." Emily took photos with her camera, documenting every detail. But before they could leave, the sound of tires crunching gravel echoed outside. Robles looked up sharply. "You brought company?" "No," Finn said, hand instinctively moving to his jacket where his revolver once sat, though it was long gone. 2 dark SUVs pulled into the yard. 4 men stepped out, faces hidden under caps. Robles whispered, "Too late." The men entered, shouting in Spanish. Emily froze, clutching her recorder. One of the men grabbed Robles, slamming him against the wall. "You think we don't watch?" the leader hissed. "You think we forget?" Another man seized the photos, tearing them in half. Finn shouted, "Wait. You don't know what's on those." The leader turned, his face partly visible, a scar along his cheek. "We know exactly what's on them," he said coldly. "It's history." They dragged Robles outside, forcing him to his knees. Emily screamed. A single gunshot rang out. The old man collapsed, his cigarette falling beside him. The SUVs sped away, leaving nothing but dust and silence. Finn and Emily knelt beside Robles. He was barely breathing. "Listen," he rasped, blood on his lips. "Locker, bus station. El Paso, number 7. And he went still. Finn clenched his fists, trembling with rage. The sheriff arrived an hour later, but the report listed the death as unsolved assault. The photos were gone, but Robles' last words gave Finn a direction. The next morning, they drove to El Paso's old central bus station. Locker number 7 was rusted, but still locked. Finn forced it open with a crowbar. Inside was a small metal box wrapped in a towel. Within it, one undeveloped film roll, labeled Mesa Copy B. They took it to a local photo lab, bribing the technician to process it immediately. The photos emerged slowly in the red-lit room. 5 images. The first 2 showed Dalton and Moreno at the motel, alive, nervous. The third showed a car, trunk filled with cash. The fourth, Soria pointing a gun. The fifth was different. A close-up of a ledger, open on a table, with handwritten names and numbers. Among them, R. Moreno, $250,000, F. Dalton, $250,000, M. Ruiz, $500,000, and beneath it, J. Cordero, $1 million. Emily gasped. That's El Blanco. Finn realized what that meant. This wasn't just about stolen money. This was a cartel ledger. That's why they killed them all. The film proved that the money wasn't just stolen. It had been redistributed. The ledger showed payouts from internal laundering, implicating El Blanco himself. He hadn't just lost cartel money. He'd used the robbery to cover his own embezzlement. Dalton and Moreno had stumbled into his scheme. The 2 men were never supposed to find that cash. They were bait. Finn and Emily knew the film was dangerous. If we release this, she said, we're signing our own death warrants. If we don't, Finn replied, they get to rewrite history again. They decided to send copies anonymously to the FBI and a national newspaper. 2 weeks later, news broke. Leaked photos suggest cartel corruption in 1981 El Paso robbery. The story spread fast, reopening old wounds. Federal agents raided several properties in Texas and New Mexico, arresting remnants of the Cordero network. El Blanco himself had vanished years earlier, but the exposure dismantled what remained of his empire. Still, the cost was high. Within a month, Emily received threats. Strange cars parked outside her home. Finn warned her to leave town, but she refused. If I disappear, she said, then they win. One night, her apartment burned down. The fire department ruled it accidental, but Finn knew better. He found her recorder half-melted, with the last tape still intact. Transcript excerpt, 1991, Emily Cross. If you're hearing this, it means they found me. The truth is in the film. The truth was always in the laundromat. It started there, and it'll end there. After her death, Finn withdrew completely. But he didn't stop. He spent his final years compiling everything, reports, photos, transcripts, into a dossier marked the Mesa File. When he died in 1996, his nephew donated it to the county archive. It sat untouched until 2017, when a group of journalism students rediscovered it. They digitized the documents, finding among them one last photograph, unlabeled, undated. It showed a man standing in front of an old laundromat, now shuttered. The man's hair was gray, but his eyes were unmistakable. Ruiz. The timestamp on the file read 1993. That meant he'd survived the shooting at the salvage yard. Survived and vanished again. The students traced the location to a small border town called San Isidro, where an old laundry shop still stood. Inside, they found a dusty backroom with a rusted sign, Mesa Wash and Dry. On the wall, behind peeling wallpaper, they uncovered a hidden cavity. Inside it, wrapped in plastic, were bundles of cash. Old bills, faded but real. Approximately $1.3 million. And beneath the cash, a faded photograph of 2 smiling men, Frank Dalton and Ray Moreno. Written on the back, in shaky handwriting, they just wanted a clean start. The discovery reignited national interest. Documentaries called it the Laundromat Heist. Others named it the Mesa Files. But among the evidence, one question remained unsolved. Who had hidden the money again? The photo analysis suggested the handwriting belonged to Ruiz, but some experts claimed it was Finn's. Neither theory could be proven. The FBI sealed the recovered money as historical evidence. The laundromat was demolished in 2019. Yet, to this day, locals still talk about the night lights flickered on the desert horizon in 1981, about the 2 men who ran from death and into legend, and about a detective who couldn't stop chasing ghosts. In an unreleased interview from his last year, Finn said quietly, "I think Ruiz buried the money, not to keep it, but to let it rest." Maybe that's what he wanted all along, to wash his sins clean. The Mesa case remains technically unsolved, though its echoes ripple through every corner of the desert. The sound of a distant washer turning, the faint scent of detergent in the wind, reminders of a crime where everyone lost and no one walked away clean. Some crimes end in prison, others end in dust. This one ended somewhere in between, in the silence between justice and memory. What do you think? Was this justice or just another cover-up? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.